Every now and then, I reflect on the phrase programming. Programming can mean a lot of things. It can mean computer programming, it can mean programming people, it can mean programming societies. And I reflect a lot about the known alignment and just note to any YouTube censors. Simply go research Project Mockingbird. This is not a theory, it's a known fact. It was used against President Kennedy. It's a known fact that the CIA was involved in going to Hollywood to suggest certain narratives in films and approving certain narratives. The Pentagon gives access to movie makers who want to have their expertise or borrow their equipment, sets, and they work with Hollywood on making sure that the narratives are what the Pentagon wants to see. This is not controversial. It happened under John Wayne, during the time of John Wayne, where we wanted to make sure that the movies were patriotic. Now, I can look at that now and say, patriotic to what? To the military-industrial complex? I don't think so. I don't think World War II was a questionable war. You can maybe question our involvement in World War I, maybe. World War II? No. And we don't question the commitment of our troops who served, right? Their patriotism. There was a shift. And Hollywood began to make movies that didn't just deride the military. They accused them of being psychopaths and sociopaths who abused our troops. And then there was that whole effort to turn every Vietnam veteran into a tree-living psychopath ready to go on a rampage around a small town. Now, when I look at this movie, Civil War from HBO, I have to consider programming. Now, what would be the help of this? What would actually be the thing that would help society in this movie? I mean, okay, so it's entertaining, I guess. There's a bunch of people, man, there are people who turn into major stars in this. And it's sort of a precursor to the second Civil War movie on HBO, which came out in 1997. Second Civil War movie. We have the current Civil War movie. That's the 1997 version, sort of a precursor to the current one we saw. The guy with the pink glasses, remember that? So we're going to show some comparisons to this, and I want you to consider programming. Who would they be programming if that's what's going on? Maybe it's just a script. Maybe it's just a movie. Sometimes things aren't what they seem, so we dig into it. Sometimes your loss of muscle or loss of health can be maybe things you don't see. It could be a deep illness. You should get that checked out with a doctor you trust. If it's something related to your diet, you could also check on that. There's men, for instance, who go around eating 20% of their foods in protein and wonder why they don't put on muscle. You can't do it. It's got to be at least 40%. In my case, I'm doing 55%, and it's still a struggle to put on muscle at the age of 57. So I use some helpers. I've disclosed this. I use HGH, testosterone supplementation. I've disclosed that. I use little bits of it. And no steroids, wouldn't do that. You can see I don't take steroids. But I use something else that is absolutely, speaking of non-controversial, it's simply digestive enzymes, except this one is power-packed. 243 experiments resulted in the creation of Masszymes. This is a product that helps you get more nutrition out of every single bite of food you eat. And because it produces amino acids in the body, and this is a proven fact through Berkshire International University side-by-side test, 1,200% more amino acids in the bodies of people who took Masszymes than people who didn't. This is a way to help put on muscle, to sustain muscle, and it also provides comfort, digestive comfort. And if you're in your mid-50s, you know exactly what digestive discomfort feels like. Alex is nowhere near his mid-50s, and he just nodded his head, the producer here. Go to bioptimizers.com/Todd, get 10% off all their products, including Masszymes, and get more nutrition with every single chew of food. Bioptimizers.com/Todd. This is the Civil War movie that people might be familiar with. Is this the first one? Or are we doing the first one first? This is the new one. This is the new Civil War movie. You might be familiar with this one.
19 states have seceded.
The United States Army ramps up activity.
The White House issued warnings to the Western forces as well as the Florida Alliance.
Here we are.
There's some kind of misunderstanding here. What? Well, you're American, okay? Okay. What kind of American are you? You don't know?
Of course, the idea of Texas and California having anything in common is pretty bizarre, but that's sort of the point of the movie. And is it programming? Maybe. Maybe it's just drama. I did notice something in that. Maybe you didn't see this if you're watching the video version of it. That initial scene with the truck rolling through the freeway with all those cars parked, that's, I'm 99% sure, lifted from The Walking Dead. I'm 99% sure they didn't spend all the money to block the freeway up again. I bet they lifted that from The Walking Dead. So in 1997, HBO came out with another movie about the Civil War. This one caused by something that we're seeing today. And it's leading to Civil War type circumstances in Europe, where there are no-go zones of neighborhoods that have been fully taken over by Islamists. I'm using that phrase on purpose because it's a politicized version of Islam. Islamists, not Muslims. Not all Muslims are Islamists, but all of Islam is political, because it contains within it a specific form of governance called Sharia law. And again, to YouTube censors, that's not controversial. That's right in the Quran. You can read it yourself. The world will come under Sharia rule, which is also not controversial to point out that that subjugates women in a very serious way. Same-sex attracted people, etc. Non-Muslims, non-Islamists. We've seen as the newcomers have been rushed into these countries in mass, we've seen uprisings from people who don't do uprisings. The Scots are pretty laid-back people these days. They didn't used to be. Back in the days of my ancestor, William Wallace, they weren't all that laid back after getting beat up all those decades. In Ireland, in the UK, people who don't protest. People who do not go out and vandalize because they're watching their society changed in 3 to 4 years by people who have no reason to have any loyalty to their country because they're being shown, we don't want your loyalty. We want your body mass. We want your beliefs. Divide and conquer. Is this what HBO was predicting in 1997?
Well, you can always renege on that deal with Kini Nkomo and that Nation of Islam group.
How many electoral college votes do they control?
Oh, 60, 70 on a good day.
How about the Koreans?
Oh, I don't know, 26?
There's your answer.
Well, no, not necessarily. We could let in 1 million more Koreans, jack up the electoral votes to 80, and bingo, you've got them eating chop suey right out of your hand.
Mr. President.
What?
They've blown up the Statue of Liberty.
The movie continues down this path, and guess what state rises up? Mine, Idaho. It leads a rebellion because, we're a very, very, very persuasive and important state in the union's economy. When you think about the phrase programming, and you think about the fact that HBO writers or people employed by HBO, people who made this film, licensed this film, see this as at least plausible, you can notice something else. The decision to make the immigrants non-Hispanic, because most of the immigrants in the country are Hispanic, coming from Mexico, Venezuela, Honduras. The decision to make them Asian, to me, communicates everything. They didn't want the controversy of being in the position of commenting on real life events, so they could say it's completely fictionalized. We're not bringing in tons of Koreans. But the programming might work this way. It might suggest to people who watch a film like this, if this happens, it's a possibility that it could lead to a civil war. Maybe you should lead the civil war. I don't want this to happen. I want Jesus to prevent all this. But this is a fact of human life. You will push people to a point. And eventually you begin to see political violence, such as is happening on the left in an organized sense. Antifa and Black Lives Matter Incorporated are organized, top-down, bottom-up political violence organizations. They've kind of backed off now, prior to this election. But look at what they did and look at the money that Black Lives Matter Incorporated got for that. Interesting that this movie was so difficult to find. Alex, who's now coming in to produce the program, found it, but it's not on the HBO website. You can't go find it easily anywhere. Alex found it and just became aware of it. There you go, 1997. I'd like to see an updated version of this, for 2024. No, this year. Except it should be a documentary about Europe, UK, and Scotland as people are rising up and saying, no, we're not going to give you our schools and our homes. Or how about the farmers who went into Paris and sprayed government buildings with animal feces? How about the win they got at the ballot box in the Netherlands to say, no, we're not going to destroy our family farms? The situation is ripe for a rebellion like this. And so let us remind ourselves, sometimes battles like this, wars like this that seem unavoidable can be avoided by getting into the strongest possible position on your knees. And prayers to God Almighty that He has mercy and that He would absolutely disrupt the plans of evil world bosses.